Good morning. Welcome. Hope you're all doing well today. It's Valentine's Day week, and I was listening to people talk about my kids singing Valentines to people all week, or preparing for it in their schools. And I was listening to the radio, and a song was coming on. Love is all you need. And so that was on my mind this week. I say, is that true? That's what I usually say. Is that really true? Thought we'd do a little thinking about it together here today. Pat is here. Good morning. Angry Cat is in the house. Hope you're doing well. Is it just a cliche? That's what I was saying. Is love the answer? It's kind of a philosophical question. People say, well, if love is the answer, what is the question? Meaning it's the answer to everything, ultimately. Is it? Aquarius is here. Good morning. Hello to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope the new year's been off to a good start for you. Yeah, is it a cliche phrase? Love is the answer, to everything ultimately, if we dig deep enough. And is it just something we say just to feel good about ourselves? That's kind of what I was thinking. Do you really believe it? And I don't know. I didn't know the answer this week anyway. I sat around thinking a lot about it, and I was like, is it something that can be so practical, for tangible things? My focus on the channel here, say, how do we lose weight? How do we get blood sugar in a better place? How do we move toward that? Is this a concept that can be helpful to us in moving that direction? I think I started thinking about it too, not just with Valentine's Day, but I was dialing in last week on this meditation practice, and that loving kindness meditation, it was kind of getting to me personally, because I was I'll be fully honest. I've tried to do that one, but it's the one I do least. I don't really dive in on it. I'm better at create the open space type of meditation, try to clear the thoughts and process. But I don't know, maybe it's different on a different day, but maybe that's the hardest one for me to do. I don't know. So then I was thinking, it really is hard to have, love for ourselves. That is where we were going in that other session, trying to get toward root causes of these things. I know I've had a lot of conversations with people. It's that emotional core, right? That emotional center that is the real key, I think, to unlocking a lot of progress and success. So how do you get at it, though? Is love the answer? Let me know if you have thoughts about it. I'm going to share a few thoughts about it as we go along, but I'd be very curious to hear, if you have thoughts or reflections. The reflexive answer is just to say, oh, yeah, yes. How could you say it isn't? But is it really? We think a lot. Okay, it's easier to have love for other people. Do you think that's true? When we think of love, we think a lot, how do we show love to other people? We don't spend a lot of time directing it inward. Yesterday, I probably have it on here again, or not yesterday, last week, I was showing that cycle. We get in a cycle of negative thinking, emotional eating, using food to cope with stress. It can be different. All of us are in different places. So we can all be struggling with different things. Some of the emotional eating, I think, can be in that covering over that space. We're giving so much, right? In so many different directions, whether it's work, we have so many responsibilities. We're kind of pouring out our energy, taking care of people that we have responsibility for, getting work done and things we have to do. Yeah, that's what Pat says. At the end of the day, there's none left for me. So, yeah, that's kind of where I want to go, into that space. Christy's here. Good morning. So nice to have you here. Hope you're doing well. It's really something to dive into, like in that thinking I was doing, I think before the holidays, on the autophagy practice. That's one of the coolest parts of fasting to me. That, historically, a fasting practice has been criticized or seen from people as like, oh, this is a restrictive practice. This is the type of thing that is going to make me feel negative, like I'll feel deprived. And this is part of the cultural perspective, right? The way I usually say it is like we have a consumption culture, right? Like in so many ways, we want, as a general rule, we want more and we want bigger and we want better. Very hard in that type of cycle to find contentment, right? This is the perspective that I want to try to help everybody flip over to. It's like fasting is like a gift for the body, as many health practices are. I try to focus on fasting as a fasting channel, but of course, health is more than fasting. I just want to say that we got to, eating healthy food is a gift to the body, getting good sleep is a gift to the body, moving our bodies in healthy ways, getting good exercise, keeping ourselves strong and flexible. Like all of these are gifts to the body, but fasting, the one historically for our society that people would say, well, that's not a gift to the body. That's like punishment. And when you take a broader look at, history, and you see actually that people have been finding value from a fasting practice in almost every cultural tradition for thousands of years, like, oh, that make you think a little bit. When you start to see something like that as like a gift, then you could say, well, if we want to be loving, right? You think of giving a gift. You think you love someone else. You give them a gift. You love your children. You want to give them nice gifts, right? So if we think about creating like self-love and compassion for ourselves, like, well, what is the kind of gift you can give? That's a very virtuous cycle, right? If you're trying to find or foster or grow love between people, right? You think about giving a gift. How do you develop a loving, compassionate relationship with yourself that is about helping you empower and support yourself in accomplishing some good thing? Maybe this is how we can start to connect it into a health goal, Maybe start with giving yourself a gift. A lot of relationships kind of start that way, right? You want to create kind of a virtuous cycle, right? What does giving yourself a health gift look like? How do you give yourself a health gift that is loving and about building a compassionate, thoughtful relationship? I do like that as a thought. I like this thought that you said, at the end of the day, say there's none left for me. Like, what is a way, and a loving way, to reverse that or to build to build towards something stronger? How do you love yourself first? I've just been thinking, I don't know, I'm on a couple months of thinking about this topic because it's also kind of counter to the conventional sort of process. Like, to say focus on yourself first, I think people would say, well, that seems selfish. Like, we don't want to be selfish. But like, I think about like love overflowing, right? Wouldn't that be a great vision to say it like, oh, are we overflowing in love? Like, that's the sort of strength that you want to approach difficult things with. Say, losing weight, overhauling our health, right? There's a difficult task. Are you coming from it from a place where in your core being, where you're feeling just at the end of your rope, right? Or are you coming from a place where you're just feeling just like overflowing? That's what I would want for everyone. Like, if I could choose a mindset or a place to be coming from, I would want you to be in that sort of place where, you're good with yourself, right? And one of the things as I was thinking through this week, I was saying, okay, not any sort of love expert, The thing that I wanted to really avoid, that put a note on here, is to say like, oh, if you're loving, you'll do this. Like, you can't start guilt tripping yourself. Like, that's the thing that I really want to explore as a thought too. Like, if we just say, like, we take a cliche phrase like, oh, just have love for yourself. I was like, okay, like, or for some person to just come, like, here I'm running this little show, like, say, what is it like? Well, just come in and tell somebody, oh, like, if you just had love for yourself, like, everything would be great. Like, it's so simplistic, I'm not trying to do anything like that. Yeah, thank you for sharing this thought. Let's think about it. I'm not going to instantly react to it. One way I was thinking about it, all right, creating, however it is, if it's an overhaul, like, is it the thing that needs to happen? That would be one way to look at it. Like, is developing a mindset, maybe through starting one of, watch the thing from last week, a loving kindness meditation, starting to have a conversation, how do you have a conversation with yourself? We're used to having conversations with other people. We're used to thinking about having loving experience or trying to show love to other people. How do you turn that inward first and build that so that you can have this mindset of like overflowing? Because like, I'm not saying that I have that. That's like an aspirational goal for me. Just kind of thinking about this stuff through this process. Talking to ourselves with kindness, this might be a first way to approach it. Like, just to start the conversation. I would say, one thing to do for this week, have a little journal and just try to be mindful. Like, what are the words that you're using as you're thinking about yourself? Sometimes we're not always aware of it. Like, do you catch yourself and saying like, oh, that is so dumb. Like, oh, that was so stupid. Like, anything like that. Or saying like, you're not, things that are along the line, you're not good enough. You could never do this. Like, the negative thought, Like, think about how you would treat a friend. This is something I try to go to a lot, because if you have a good friend that came to you and they were really struggling and they were looking for advice and saying, hey, I'm really having trouble moving forward. It's like, well, you love this person. You care about them. You want to show compassion and grace to them. How do you have that sort of relationship with yourself? A journal is one way I try to do it. Write the thoughts out. Maybe through the day as you're getting toward it. And then think about, like, how would you kindly or lovingly respond to a friend who is going through it, writing this to you, maybe in a letter? This type of mindset, this is where I was struggling this week, where I was like, okay, is love the answer, or is it just something we tell ourselves? Like, when you bring it down, coming out of a scientific process, I don't know. People will say, well, look, the body, it's just calories and hormones and food and, I think we've had a very reductionist mindset historically in the scientific and medical community. I think that's changing. I hope it's changing. One tangible scientific sort of way that these are connected is just that when we're stressed, when we're feeling isolated and alone, right, this is having hormonal effects on the body. One of which is that our levels of stress hormones like cortisol rise. And cortisol is raising our blood sugar and is promoting storage of fat. And that's not the sort of environment that we want to create. Like, if we're trying to create a space that feels good, that doesn't feel like a struggle or a chore, that can be maintained and sustained in the long term, right? We need to create a hormonal environment that supports that in the body. And an environment that is stressed out and, it doesn't support that. We're like fighting against it. Have you ever felt that way? Like, you're trying to move forward, but it feels like you're kind of like stuck in the mud. And it's like every step is a challenge. I have an image. Maybe I'll post it on the little YouTube community this week. But it was like, it's got, I think, like a compass and then a speedometer. And then it's like, it says speed and direction. And it's like, focus more on the direction, than the speed. Like, if like you're pushing in a direction, you're forcing. Every step is feeling like a struggle. It's like, okay, what is the way to kind of scale that back and say, what is the direction? Maybe like this loving perspective, like, is the actual perspective you need to build first. We think we're trying to, you let me know your goals, right? The goals I'm trying to help people with most, that I talk about most, like, right, lose weight, get the blood sugar better, right? The level up from that, our core being, our emotional health, like, to me, that's always been a bigger thing, the thing I usually say is, like, if somebody lost all the weight they ever want, but they hated themselves, like, if that was a patient of mine, I would feel terrible about that as an outcome, right? And it's very unlikely that would be maintained, right? But like, if someone developed a perspective of kindness and joy, and they never accomplished a weight loss goal that they wanted, but they developed that sort of mindset, like, then I would feel so good about it, And usually what I found is developing that sort of mindset is actually what leads things to the place where people have the success. And so I tell people, maybe you need to let go of some specific goal, right? And pull things back and do this work first, Yeah, I do really like that as a mindset. Thank you for sharing. Find if I'm becoming resentful, if you're not taking that time for yourself each morning, getting up earlier, building that time. Yeah, I think you have to provide space for a relationship to develop, right? If we're thinking about this mindset, how do you build this sort of relationship, a loving relationship with yourself? Like, you have to make it a priority, right? You have to find the time for it. And if this really is ultimately one of the most important things I could do for my health, you say it's way out of the box, right? It's not going to the gym, as important it is. It's not the food. It's not all the stuff. So all that stuff is important, right? But to get that level up, build that relationship, you got to carve out the space to do it. And if it's the most important thing, like, is it really the most important thing to you? You have to find a way, to do it. I'm so glad that you have found that space. That is, yeah, these are really the types of questions that I think are profound and getting to the core of it. What are the things that have happened to us over the years that landed us in this space? Yeah. Path toward the holistic approach to healing. That's what I was diving into on that diabetes live stream. Like, people are like, really, we don't use the word healing in medicine. And I've been thinking a lot about this. Like, we have a lot of surrogate words for healing. And remission is a big one. That would be in like the cancer space. We really don't like to say healed of cancer. It's too powerful. It's too hopeful. So, but in remission, like, that's kind of like, okay. In the addiction space, people say recovery. If someone has been dealing with drug addiction and then they've come to a place of healing, right? We don't say heal though. We just say recovery, and it's kind of hedging the bets, because healing is too powerful and too optimistic, I think, for a lot of people. But like, healing to me implies like we're really getting to a root level of it, and a root level of many things. And this is something that I've been contemplating a lot. The root level of many health problems is trauma, ultimately. And trauma can take different forms. And trauma doesn't have to mean, severe trauma that we think of, like someone is sexually assaulted or some horrific thing. But it's all of the things that have happened to us over the years that have led us into a space of regret and self-loathing and everything like that. Places where people hurt us and made us feel that we weren't good enough, and we turned to certain things, right? For some of us, it's food, and that's how we developed this deep coping cycle in our body. Like, this is how I feel good about myself again, after that. I read a book. Do I even have it here? I think I left it upstairs. What was it called? Let me look it up, since I can. Dr. Gabor Mate. And it was like The Myth of Normal. That's what it was called. Trauma, illness, and healing in a toxic culture. I tell you, there's a way to dive deep. I really found that book to be a profound book. The Myth of Normal. That's I've had that idea for so long, like the myth of normal, like that this culture like tells us like this way that we're living, these experiences that we're having, it's just normal. And that book like really crystallized a lot of it for me. Like, we have all these cycles of trauma, and then it's kind of almost Orwellian. Like, did you ever read Orwell, where it was like, I can't remember all the reversals, but it was like ignorance is strength and freedom or slavery is freedom. Like all these things are opposite in the Orwell dystopia. Like in our culture, trauma is strength. And, this guy's a doctor. He had a lot of similar experiences to I have, medical training. Like we traumatize people in our process of making them healers, and that is what is crazy. Queen Bee, hello, good morning. So nice to have you here. Hope you're doing well today. In that book, he gets into so many things where it's like, some of the lowest points in my life in a medical training, I've been like working for 36 hours. Like you have thoughts of feeling like you're going to die or that you might be better off if you did. And it's like, you're just trying. And then this is what healing is supposed to be in our culture. And then it's glorified. Like people say like, oh, this is like, you must really care about your patients if you're like so miserable and like doing all this, like it's just because you care. And then we say like, oh, the people who do more and more of that, like this is how you show that you're a loving person, right? In our culture. And I think that's how I know I got in some personal cycles like that. After I got out of my medical training, it's like I couldn't get out of that mindset. And so I started moonlighting. I was like, now I had this job that I always wanted, and I'm making enough money. I don't need, to go out and get a second job. But then I started moonlighting and I kept doing that. And there was like a really negative cycle, and I got so unwell from it, no doubt. The book, I should do like a video or a show on that book. It's so good. He talked a lot about autoimmune disease in that book. And so many patients have come to him with autoimmune disease, and his belief, and this would be way out there, for modern medicine, but his belief is that somewhere at the root of a lot of autoimmune disease is trauma, actually. And he helps people heal from trauma, and he sees people getting better from their autoimmune condition, which is just so mind-boggling, but he goes through like, this mind-body connection is so much more powerful than we think it is. This is the thing, yeah, if you choose the cigarettes instead of the dessert, then you're on a different video. Well, it's probably a good choice on multiple levels, I think desserts was probably a better choice, and then I'm glad that you're here either way. Body Keeps the Score. Yeah, that, I have never read this book. It is on my list, but I've talked with a lot of people about it, and it's just, it's got to be one of the best titles of a book, because it just, it communicates the idea. But I've experienced that, I have never talked too much about it, but I developed a crazy autoimmune disease. End of 2019, 2020. And, I was describing this cycle, how like I left my medical training. It was like I never, everything always, it's like a ratchet, everything ratchets up. Our stress always ratchets up. And we always think, oh, someday I'll get to a place where we can unwind all this, but then we never do. And I was like, getting out of my medical training, there would have been the greatest place to be like, oh, I can like really like, it never occurred to me. I thought I was trying to do all the things to get healthy, but I was like, it was always add things. I wanted to lose weight. So I was like, well, I start running half marathons and I start, going super exercise. But at the same time, I'm also starting my whole medical practice and moonlighting and, doing all these things and starting a research program. And I got, nobody teaches you how to say no. That's what I learned in, in medicine. The medical system tries to squeeze every drop out of every healthcare provider. Is burning everybody out. I read an essay, I don't know where it was, something like The Atlantic or something. It was saying like, the health system survives on the goodwill of doctors and nurses, basically. That people are calculating. They're like, these are good people. They're not going to let their patients like die or anything. So we can cut their staffing back 20% and they'll just make up the difference. And that's what happens. Absolutely. And that's why people burned out. And I don't know. I had, we are all going through our own work. And so I never thought, oh, I'm strong. I'll never get, burned out. But then the body keeps the score, right? And my body kept the score. I don't know. I don't have to yammer on and on about my situation, but I got in a very bad place where, and I think this is the sort of thing where like, and I have come to believe this. If you look up this book, Myth of Normal, like, eventually the body will say no, right? And I think a lot of disease can come from this place, whereas like the body, that's one of the things in the book that he says, like, disease is a teacher. And this is a very painful thing to see, but it's something I came to accept through a process, of dealing with an autoimmune disease, is like, oh, like my life is completely out of balance, and it's been out of balance for multiple decades, and I'm just oblivious to it. And it took like the body completely rejecting it, and the body is like, this has got to stop. And so that to me is a loving thing. This is like to dial it home. You say, if you're dealing with an autoimmune disease, is like kind of a horrific thing. It's like your own body is attacking you. You feel like betrayed. You feel like it's just, it's really awful. But then you say, oh, the disease is the teacher. The disease is showing you this can't continue, right? Is actually the body showing love to you. Like, how radically out of the box is this? You develop an autoimmune disease. You say, could that be loving, right? Sometimes the loving thing to do, so painful, so difficult. I don't know what all this is like, and this is kind of like not in the realm of, regular modern medicine or a scientific thing. Like, is the body thinking about these things? Like, is the body saying like, I don't want to do it, but I got to do it? Like, I don't know. But like, I'll just tell you that, when I was at the peak of the insanity of my medical practice, and I was running a hospital resident ward and a medical clinic and running a research program and like doing all this stuff. And then the pandemic hit. I think that's what really blew it over the top. And then staffing a COVID unit, and then I became a medical director. Like, and it's everything ratcheting up. You can never say no. Like, you've got to be able to say no. Like, what I've come to see, like, a loving thing. Like, we always think of like a loving thing is like you just say yes to everything. Oh, someone asked me for this, I have to say yes. Sometimes a loving thing is like you just have to say no to stuff, and saying no, especially to people you care about, even, or to yourself, right? Doesn't always feel good. Doesn't necessarily even feel like a loving thing to do. Feels like, oh, do I not care about someone? Do I not care about this thing? I'll say no to them. I've lived that book, Myth of Normal, because, I listen to it. I think a lot of times we don't have a mindset in our culture, disease as teacher. We see disease as enemy. You start to see disease as teacher and say, what can I learn about this? Like, could my body be showing love for me? So radical. And this is not a randomized controlled trial. Like I say, this is not the scientific establishment, but I unwound this entire process. I said no to almost everything that I was doing. I got out of the hospital. I got rid of the medical director. I finished my clinical study and didn't start another one. I shut down my whole practice, and the autoimmune disease that I was suffering from is gone. Like, It's so wild. It's totally wild. Talk more about that someday, I suppose. I heard one doctor say diabetes comes from trauma. I haven't heard that, but if you find a link to that, I'd love to watch it. I mean, I have a very open mind to it, and I'm not going to come and say that just, I read a book and I've had a personal experience of healing, and I'm not saying that everybody can just do it, and it certainly wasn't easy. It's actually the hardest, thing that I have ever done. But I'm very open to saying that something like this is very true, and I think it is true. And because we all have things, like Pat was saying, we all have things that have led things to be the way they are. And we can get into such a defeated sort of mindset where we say that we can never escape from the past, right? That our future can't be different. But of course it can. And I think that diving in this direction, it is the way to do it. Here, I try to go in order. Yeah, I think you would like reading this book, Myth of Normal, because they cite some things there, and I haven't, to be clear, I haven't personally read all these studies, but he is citing studies like this. Apparently there are studies like this, and rates of autoimmune disease among people with higher stress, careers as apparently higher, and I'll have to look into that and verify that, but it makes sense. It's this kind of idea is reminding me, have you ever seen they have these kind of epidemiological surveys of global happiness? And it's where are people the happiest, actually? And it's not in the wealthiest countries. It's in the middle, it's in places not where people are impoverished, and struggling to survive. Okay, this is not the happiest place, and it's definitely not in the wealthiest places. It's in places where people have their basic needs met, but they're not overwhelmed, with the stress. This is the sort of thing, okay? Getting a disease, you say, is a horrible thing to experience. But how many times is it that the disease is actually what sets people on the course? The thing that I've seen the most is someone has the heart attack, right? This is what I see in my primary care practice the most. You spend years and years and years trying to talk to someone and be what if you did this, or what if you did that, right? But then someone has the heart attack, which is just, it's a horrific thing to go through, right? Terrible pain, and you can die, and all these sort of things. And but talk to somebody who's had a heart attack, right? And you talk about something that wakes somebody up and sends someone in a different direction. I just have one patient in my mind. Guy had a heart attack, almost died, had quadruple bypass. And this guy came out of this experience, and a year later, you can't recognize him as the same person. He became a vegan, and I'm not saying that everybody needs to do that. I don't push veganism or anything. A lot of benefit can come from controlling blood sugar from, eat an animal product instead of a processed grain. Okay, it's true. But I'm just thinking this guy, right? The guy lost 100 pounds. He became super active. You could not pick the guy off on the street, But He'd struggled for decades to never change anything. And here this disease, and you talk to him a year later, he said, this is the best thing that happened to me. And, you know, it's so profound, right? Oh, you're saying to someone else, but like something like that, yeah, it's so profound. Oh, man. So can we find this sort of space before the heart attack, right? This would be a place to get into, right? Do we have to experience our body completely rejecting like this before we change? Like, man, like I wish I could have found myself, somewhere in like 2014, and be like, hey, younger self, like you are in for like a really rough go if you don't, change it, But kind of that seems to be life. Like sometimes like we have to, I don't know, maybe that's not true, but it's at least the way it is. Like the way it is often is we have to hit that bottom point before we actually change. That's how it is. How do we avoid that? It's the loving path. That's what I'm trying to do in this whole show, is just say, love to me is like a guide, right? Disease can be a guide. Disease can be loving. Love can be a loving experience. A loving expression does not want people to experience pain and things, but sometimes it takes that to get us to change, to recognize what is truly valuable, and to make it a priority. And so my biggest encouragement out of this sort of space is to tell people, like, try to scale your thinking all the way back to the root level. The root level. This is why, I asked the question, is love the answer? I say yes. That's what I put on the little picture for the show. I say it is. Like, love is the core thing that I think is going on here in this experience, Like, we're all here. Like, we didn't, I think, choose to be here. But here we are. We're having an experience of some kind. I think this experience in some fashion is about learning love for ourselves, for people, If we get through this whole experience and we don't do that, like, I don't know what this all is, But like, if we get to the end of this operation and we haven't found love for ourselves, ultimately, no matter what our health is, if we lose weight or we don't, or we have diabetes or we don't, it's hard to say that we won this experience, I don't think this is a competition either. That's probably not the way to talk about it, but yeah. So there's some silver linings. Sometimes there's a silver lining. I've seen that quite a lot, actually. It's interesting where somebody goes into the hospital, someone has some traumatic thing, but they lost a lot of weight. And they're like, there's at least a little silver lining. People look, oh, it was so horrific in the hospital, and I lost so much weight because I couldn't even eat. And I was like, but that was actually the part that was good. Like, actually, because, like, you're better off for that part of it. Like, the whole heart attack, the whole, awful thing that happened, that was horrible. But the fact that you had a little trial by fire on some fasting there, and in fact, like, and sometimes you'll even see it, but now your blood sugar is actually better. Like, there's healing in a fasting space. Part of the reason you made it through that is the body actually used the fasting. It's the thing. So not many good points in a COVID pandemic, but take what you can get, right? Yeah. Yeah. We'll see where this sits over the week. This felt good as a session. These are kind of the thoughts that I wanted to share. See where it sits this week. I'd love for people, just think about it. I'm going to be thinking about it. I've been thinking about it, over the whole week. How do we use these thoughts? Move toward love and cultivating a loving relationship with ourselves first so that it can overflow out into the rest of our life. I think that might be the core of health, actually, and that's not really in our health system, but like if trauma is at the root of so much disease that we don't appreciate, if all of these experiences are driving ultimately decisions that we make that we're not happy with, okay, to get way upstream of it, to get to the very core of it. I just think filling up our tank. How do we fill up our own tank first so that we are feeling in a place of health and healing and love and compassion for ourselves, and then that flows out to everybody else, Maybe that is really the true root of health. Even if it isn't in some scientific, sense, like, can it be, You say, can we make it that way for ourselves? Can we live in a way as if it were true? Like if you're a super cynic and you're like, I don't believe in love, or like whatever. Like, can you live in a way as if it were true? What if it were true? Can you just live that way? and might you get to a similar place? You say, what if it was true that actually love was at the core of this? Our lack of it is what is causing so much disease and dysfunction. Like, what if we just lived that way? Would that lead to a healthier, more beautiful world for ourselves and just radiate it out? Ourselves, our family. It's a powerful question. Let's focus on that this week. I think maybe we all do this, right? Swinging between self-love and self-hatred. Hatred for what I've done to myself. Love allows me to believe I can fix the damage. Absolutely. We can't change the past, right? We can only learn from the past. And like moving toward love as a perspective, like, isn't that, it's like letting go of the hatred, right? Like releasing it. I was listening to some sort of mental health podcast or something a couple months ago. It was talking about like, we hate people who have hurt us, right? And we think that by hating people that we're getting back at them. Somehow that's how it feels. Like, it's so angry, about these things that happened. But like, many times that person doesn't even know that we're having these feelings, the hatred. It's hurting ourselves. Like, we're the ones that are retaining that. And that's the way that people who have hurt us, that's the way they continue to hurt us. And we do it to ourselves perversely by retaining, you know, the trauma, the experience. Like, the loving way to treat ourselves is to let go of it, right? You have to let go of these things in order to free yourself from it. Maybe I should do maybe our live thing next week. I'll just do on journaling, because journaling is an incredibly powerful practice. I encourage everybody to journal. Like, if people can't journal, then I say, like, get a therapist. But I say journaling is like becoming your own therapist. And my experience has been that journaling can be a more personal and deeper experience, but it's difficult, right? And like, as a place to start, going and seeing a therapist is like the verbal version of it. Like, you tell them something, and then they reflect back to you in maybe a thoughtful way. So that's how I encourage one way to use a journal, right? Put the thoughts into it and let them come back to you. Yeah. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is the path to letting go, I think, right? Like, to forgive someone means, like, you're not holding on to this anymore. Forgiving doesn't mean forget, like, you can't forget about these things, but it means you're not retaining that trauma within your being. You're not letting it continue to eat at you. And maybe that is the path that you need to walk down with some of that can free up that emotional space, right? That all this emotional space that we harbor, with all the things that have happened, that's taking up our capacity to heal, to change, right? Because to change is like very difficult, right? To move toward health. Like, how do you move in a new direction when you're carrying all the baggage of a lifetime of regrets and hatred and things? You've got to let go of it. Thank you so much for sharing this space. Thank you so much for sharing all of these thoughts and reflections. If you're coming through on the replay, or anyone that's here, throw further questions or reflections into the comments. I love reading that throughout the week. I'll respond further to the comments throughout the week. If you have reflections, also, you can send them to me in an email. Go simplefasting.com, and you got contact up there. Always drop me a personal note. I wish you the very best. I hope these thoughts are helpful to you this week. This is deep stuff. I hope it is really helpful for you. And I will look forward to chatting with you again on Sunday. Be well, everybody.